Hello everyone, welcome to this video discussion on the different philosophies of education. In this video discussion, I will be discussing the different educational philosophies that we have, and later on, I will also be talking about how to formulate your own philosophy of education. Before we proceed, let me first define some of the terms that will be used in this discussion. First one is the word philosophy. This word refers to one's beliefs about why, what, and how one teaches, whom one teaches, and about the nature of learning. It is a set of principles that guides professional action through the events and issues faced in the teaching environment. So that is philosophy. Second term is principle. It is a rule for guiding the ship education so that it will reach the port designated by the philosophy of education, or it is also a guiding norm by which a process is carried on. Third is morality. It is a particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or society. And then we also have the word value, which is an abstract, desirable end state that people strive for or aim to uphold, such as freedom, loyalty, or tradition. And lastly, we have here the term transcendent, which means going beyond the normal limits and boundaries because it is more significant than them. So as mentioned a while ago, I will be talking about the different philosophies of education. While for some of you, you might have already initial ideas on these different philosophies, and I know in the field of education, this has been discussed several times already. But let me first refresh your minds about these different philosophies of education so that you will have your own springboard in formulating your very own philosophy in teaching. Let us begin with essentialism. So the description for each of these philosophies will be divided into three. We have why teach, what to teach, and how to teach. Okay, so we have here the reason, and then details about what to teach, and also the strategies on how to teach using this philosophy. To begin, we have essentialism. This philosophy contends that teachers teach for learners to acquire basic knowledge, skills, and values. Teachers teach to transmit the traditional moral values and intellectual knowledge that students need to become model citizens. So this one is more on modeling, giving our students the best values, the best exemplary values that you can show them so that you can also project yourself as a role model so that they can also at the same time imitate whatever values you have and for them to become role model citizens of this country. Now, what to teach? The emphasis is on academic content for students to learn the basic skills or the fundamental R's. So when you say fundamental R's in the context of essentialism, we have here reading, writing, arithmetic, right, conduct. So these are the fundamental R's. When you say essentialism, we are talking about the essential skills that a learner should possess. And these are the basic skills. The essentialist curriculum includes traditional disciplines such as the use of mathematics, natural science, history, foreign language, and even literature. So if we talk about the strategies on how to teach the essentialist way, essentialist teachers emphasize mastery of the subject matter because you could not really acquire all the needed skills and competencies if you are not an expert of the subject matter. They are expected to be intellectual and moral models. They are seen as fountain of information and as a paragon of virtue. Okay, so when you say fountain of information, this is something to do with the mastery of the subject content. And on one hand, paragon of virtue refers to you possessing the important values a person should have. Core requirements, longer school day, and longer academic year have to be observed in the essentialist perspective. So the second one is the progressivism or the progressivist perspective. Progressivist teachers teach to develop learners into becoming enlightened and intelligent citizens of a democratic society. Teachers teach learners so they may live life fully now, not to prepare them for adult life. So the progressivism or the progressivistic approach here looks at the present as to how the teachers can mold their students to be prepared at the moment okay, and not really more on what's ahead of them. Progressivists are identified with need-based and relevant curriculum. Since we are talking about what is currently needed, so what is highlighted in the curriculum are those things that are high significance only. It responds to students' needs and relates to students' personal life and experience. The subjects that are emphasized are natural and social sciences, because when you say natural sciences, it has something to do with the earth where you live in. And second is with the social sciences, the different communal issues that one has to face on a daily basis. So since the focus is more on identifying how to live at the moment, so adapting and also adopting concepts related to natural and social sciences will be of paramount significance. Okay, so how does a progressivist teacher teach? Experiential methods are employed. Learners learn by doing, so it's more on experiential or hands-on learning. Problem-solving method is heavily relied upon. Hands-on, minds-on, hearts-on methods like field trips, thought-provoking games, and puzzles are also utilized. This is for the learners to really have a first-hand experience on how it is to learn things or absorb contents and concepts. Okay? The third philosophy of education is perennialism. Perennialists teach to develop students' rational and moral powers. We are talking about rationality and morality. Views all human beings to possess the same essential nature. Now, it is heavy on humanities, on general education, because we are talking about rationality and morality. So the best way for us to talk about this one, if you are a perennialist teacher, is to delve more into the study of humanities, specifically general education. There is less emphasis on vocational and technical education. What the perennialist teacher teaches are lifted from the great books, okay, the literary masterworks which teach us something about life. If, for example, if it is more on the Catholic perspective, well, the Holy Bible being one of the great books could be considered as a great source of these teachings. Same goes with other religion, such as for Islam, their Quran could be a good source of these morals that could be taught to the learners. The perennialist classroom is centered around the teachers. The teachers do not allow the students' interests or experiences to substantially dictate what they teach. Students engage in Socratic dialogues or mutual inquiry sessions. We could say that perennialism is the total opposite of progressivism. If in progressivism you give students hands-on experience, or we call it as also experiential teaching, in perennialism, you focus more on yourself as a teacher. That means it's too teacher-centered and you want everything to be in accordance to what you believe should be included in the curriculum. We also have another philosophy of education, which is existentialism. The main concern is to help students understand and appreciate themselves as unique individuals who accept complete responsibility for their thoughts, feelings, and action. Now, the very point of existentialism is that existence precedes essence. So you need to exist first before you will truly know what your essence is. So as human beings, we are bound to believe that we really have a purpose for living this life. And so this is the core of existentialism. The humanities are given tremendous emphasis to help students unleash creativity and self-expression. Actions of historical individuals are also given emphasis to provide students possible models for their own behavior. Vocational education is also regarded to teach students about themselves. Okay, so in existentialist perspective, all the teacher that does is to make sure that students truly understand the very essence for their existence. Learning is self-paced and self-directed. Teachers employ values clarification strategy while remaining non-judgmental and keeping themselves from imposing their values on their students, since values are personal. So here in existentialism, values play an important role, because if you do not have the values, then most likely you would not be able to really understand the very reason why you exist. Okay? We also have behaviorism. This one is concerned with modification and shaping students' behavior, but providing for a favorable environment since they believe that they are a product of their environment. So the very focus of behaviorism is, from the word itself, the behavior of the learners. Behaviorists teach students to respond favorably to various stimuli and environment, since behaviorists look at people and other animals as complex combinations of matter that act only in response to internally or externally generated physical stimuli. So in the behaviorism, in behaviorism as a philosophy of education, it is emphasized here that behavior is very much important in understanding certain phenomenon happening around us. Okay? Teachers ought to arrange environmental conditions so that students can make responses to stimuli. Physical variables like light, temperature, arrangement of furniture, size, and quantity of visual aids have to be controlled to get the desired responses of the learners. It's more on manipulating the behavior of the learners. But this one is not direct manipulation, as what is actually being manipulated is the pedagogy itself. Okay? Let's also talk about linguistic philosophy. Teachers teach to develop the communication skills of the learner because the ability to articulate, to voice out the meaning and values of things that one obtains from his or her experiences of life and the world is the very essence of man. So the core of linguistic philosophy is learning how to communicate effectively. Okay, from the word itself, linguistic. Learners are taught to communicate clearly, how to send clear, concise messages, and how to receive and correctly understand messages being sent. Communication takes place in three ways, and these are verbal, nonverbal, and paraverbal. So these are the focus, okay, the focus of linguistic philosophy. Experiential method is the most effective way to teach language and communication because you cannot really expose a student to the best learning platform in communication if you will not ask him or her to undergo an actual speaking experience or communicative experience. The teacher facilitates dialogue among learners and between him or her and his or her students because in the exchange of words, there is also exchange of ideas. Another one is constructivism. Constructivists teach to develop intrinsically motivated and independent learners who are able to construct knowledge and make meaning of them. So the very focus or target of constructivism are learners who are independently motivated. Okay, those who are independent enough and at the same time are intrinsically motivated to do certain things. Learners are taught how to learn. They are taught learning processes and skills such as searching, critiquing, evaluating information, relating these pieces of information, reflecting the same, making meaning out of them, drawing insights, posing questions, researching, and constructing new knowledge. So if you see, there is this systematic flow of the different steps that could be done based on the constructivist perspective. The teacher provides students with data or experiences that allow them to hypothesize, predict, manipulate objects, pose questions, research, investigate, imagine, and invent. We also have the last one here, which is social reconstructionism. This one aims to bring out the consciousness of an individual about social events, concerns, and problems being confronted. So, if in existentialism, the primary focus of the learner is to understand the very essence of his or her existence, here in social reconstructionism, learners are exposed to different social problems so that they will also know the gravity of these problems and could probably recommend possible solutions to end these problems. This philosophy also provides vision of the better world by looking for solutions and addressing social concerns and issues. Teachers should be an instrument to encourage and lead students for social reforms. Now, the primary emphasis is on social justice issues. The central question was, what is the aim of teacher education? It gives importance to the broad purpose of education. And the primary methods of teaching include problem-oriented type, community-based learning, and group discussions. Since the purpose here is to have substantial discussions about the different social issues or social events, then there has to be a good amount of group discussions happening within the classroom. Teachers should also foster cooperation, not competition, by developing critical thinking and becoming transformative intellectuals. Now, this is just a sort of a review on the different philosophies of education. I'm pretty sure that you have had already encountered this way back in your freshman years. But this time, the very reason why I have reminded you of all these philosophies of education is for you to clearly identify your very own teaching philosophy. Now, teaching philosophies express your values and beliefs about teaching. When you say philosophy, or your teaching philosophy, it has something to do about what is it that you truly desire as an educator or a teacher. They are personal statements that introduce you as a teacher. In developing your teaching philosophy, you should discuss how your values and beliefs about teaching fit into the context of your discipline. What needs to be included in your teaching philosophy? The first one is your concept of learning. What do you mean by learning? As a teacher, how do you perceive learning? What happens in a successful learning situation? Note what constitutes learning or mastery in your discipline. So this is very important that you know when to tell a person is already learned, or what to tell when a person is already a master of the content of the subject being taught. Okay? Second one is you have to fully understand as well your concept of teaching. What are your values, beliefs, aspirations as a teacher? Do you wish to encourage mastery, competency, transformational learning, lifelong learning, general transference of skills, or critical thinking? And for you, what does a perfect teaching situation look like and why? So these should also be included in your own teaching philosophy. Next one is you have to clearly identify your goals for your students. What skills should students obtain as a result of your teaching? Think about your ideal student and what the outcomes of your teaching would be in terms of these students' knowledge or behavior. Now, if it is your teaching philosophy, it's also very important that you be very clear about the different goals that you set for your students. Through this, you will already know how to attack the pedagogy for your students. Okay? Next one is your teaching methods. What methods will you consider to teach these goals and objectives? What are your beliefs regarding learning theory and specific strategies you would use? And what new ideas or strategies would you want to try? So if you want to really have a strong teaching philosophy, you also have to be very particular with your teaching approach, method, and stratagems. Another thing is you have to identify your interaction with students. What are your attitudes towards advising and mentoring students? How would an observer see you interact with students? And why do you want to work with students? Okay. We also need to include assessing learning. How will you assess students' growth and learning? What are your beliefs about grading? Or do you grade students on a percentage scale or on a curve? What assessment do you use? So we know that if you're a teacher or if you are an educator, the best assessment tools should be used so that you can accurately gauge the competencies or the skills achieved by your students. And lastly, we have here professional growth. How will you continue growing as a teacher? What goals do you have for yourself and how will you teach them, or how will you reach them rather? And how do you know when you've taught effectively? Now, these guide questions are just guides, okay? They serve only as somewhat like a guide or a framework on how you can start formulating your teaching philosophy. Now, for some of you, you might be asking, why is there an importance to know what your teaching philosophy is? Or why is it important to write your teaching philosophy? Remember that once you start teaching, you have nothing to do anymore because all you have to do is to simply go there in your classroom and teach the subject, right? There's no time for you to really absorb everything and then as if you are really like absorbing the moment that you have finally started teaching. Okay? However, your teaching philosophy will guide you on the things that you will have to observe once you have entered the world of teaching. Through these teaching philosophies, you will be able to realize that there should be something that you set for yourself in terms of teaching. There's also something that you need to set for your students. And if you have successfully achieved all of these standards that you have set, then most likely you will have whatever you are expecting from the class. Okay? So for example, you have their skills, competencies improved, and also the knowledge that your students have gotten from you. Okay? But among all of these questions, I strongly believe that what is very important here, or what are actually very important here, are these two: your concept of learning and your concept of teaching. It's very important that as a teacher, most especially if you're still a young one or someone who is neophyte in the vocation of teaching or in the teaching vocation, you need to have clarity in terms of your concept of learning and teaching. For example, before, I believed that once I become a teacher, I would be authoritative. I will really have to impose discipline inside my classroom. But when I already entered my first year of teaching, I realized that it was no longer effective to be like that. Hence, I became more lenient, and instead, I fed my students with so much encouragement so that they can actually feel that they are being motivated by their subject teacher. Okay, from then on, I realized that I needed to tweak something with regard to my teaching philosophy. So from that, it all started that I began to love teaching. At the same time, I learned how to find my track in this teaching career. Okay, so this time the question is, what is your teaching philosophy? I'd like to read your teaching philosophy. So if you have questions, can you post them in the open forum? And I'd like you also to write your teaching philosophy here in the open forum. Thank you very much for listening.